Once again, welcome everybody. I'm Drew Carter from the Office of Admission. I'm so glad you're joining us tonight. Hope you are safe and well and weathering the storm we're seeing here in the Northeast right now. A few quick technical notes about tonight's webinar. First, closed captioning is available. You see the button in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Second, please put any questions you have in the Q&A. We're going to do our best to answer those either as we go along, through the webinar at the end, or we'll type some answers directly to you. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm so glad also to be joined by Krista Gilmore from the Office of Financial Aid at Holy Cross. She's going to walk us through the FAFSA and talk about important things to think about as families are considering filling out the FAFSA. This is the first in a 4-part series, and we hope you will join us for the following 3 sessions after tonight. Tonight's session will also be archived on Holy Cross's website by tomorrow. So let's get started, Krista. How are you going to help us figure out the FAFSA?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for tuning in. The session you probably least look forward to, but we're going to talk about the FAFSA and help you figure out the FAFSA. So let's get started. So this is what we're going to go over tonight. What is the FAFSA? What is this form we keep hearing about that we have to do that everyone says is dreadful? Let's get past that. What do I need to complete it? How do you complete it? When should you complete it? What happens after you complete it? And then we'll save time for questions. So what is the FAFSA? Well, it's the free application for federal student aid. The most important thing to remember here is that it is a free application. So if you're on a website that's asking you for payment after you've completed it, you're in the wrong place. So we'll give you those websites tonight of where to go to complete the FAFSA. And it is a free application, and it determines your eligibility for federal financial aid. It's important because of all the schools across the country to which are applying, all colleges and universities. If they require anything in their financial aid process, it will be the FAFSA. So some schools, it's the only application you complete for financial aid. And for other schools, it's just a part of the application for financial aid, part of the process. And we have other sessions to explain other parts of the financial aid process. But the FAFSA is the one form that will be required by every institution offering financial aid.
Krista, can I ask a kind of a dumb question?
Yeah.
It's the free application for federal student aid, but I think in a lot of families' minds, especially if they're their first time going through the process, they've heard about financial aid coming from a college. Can you help make sense of that? This is for federal student aid, but then they're expecting financial aid to come from a college.
Right. So federal financial aid, the federal government has several forms of financial aid, and we do have another session that will really dissect grant, scholarship, loan, federal work study, and what that all means. But the FAFSA does determine eligibility for federal financial aid. That could be some grant, that could be some loan, or work study. And but for some institutions, this form will determine your institutional aid eligibility as well. That will vary school to school. So there could be another application required that schools use to determine eligibility for institutional aid. But if nothing else, they will require the FAFSA.
Great, makes sense. Awesome.
So what do you need to complete the FAFSA? So when you sit down to complete the FAFSA, this is the list of what you need. But first of all, you'll need to establish an FSA ID, and you do that at studentaid.gov. So you're creating an account, and this FSA ID is established for both the student and the parent, just one parent and the student. And it's something that you want, it's a username passphrase situation that we do for everything that we do these days. And you want to create that account, and you want to keep that in a safe place, that FSA ID. That becomes your electronic signature to sign the FAFSA, but also which both the student and parent need to do. But also it's your electronic signature when you sign for federal loans later, if you do that, parent loan or student loan. So, and you can use it again when you renew your FAFSA next year, because the FAFSA is you'll file it every year for financial aid, not just the beginning of your first year in college, but each year. So you establish your FSA ID. You'll want your social security number or your alien registration number. Federal financial aid is available to US citizens or eligible non-citizens. So you'll have to have those identification numbers. You'll sit down with your 2020 federal tax returns and W-2 forms, or records of untaxed income. So that could be workers' compensation, unemployment compensation, although that's part of your income tax form, disability benefits. You'll sit down knowing what are our balances in our savings and checking accounts, and other investments you might have that are non-retirement investments. So it's going to include money market, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, anything, and even other real estate. If you have a rental property or just a second home, you're going to sit down with the equity. You know, what's the value minus the debt on the properties that you have, other than your primary residence. So the FAFSA does not want to know the equity in your primary home. And it doesn't want to know the value of your 401k or your IRA or any retirement funds. So that's what's included in the investments. I think that's the last thing on my list. Yeah. Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention, though, is the FAFSA and all of this information is going to reflect the custodial household. So the household in which the student lives. So if that's with one parent, or if that's with two parents, or if that's parent and a step parent, and the other biological parent lives somewhere else, this is only going to reflect the parent and step parent income tax and asset and everything information. It also is not going to include legal guardians or foster parents. They are not included on the FAFSA. It would be adoptive parents, though. Those parents would be included, of course. So that's an important bit to remember because it differs from other aid applications that we will talk about in another session. So how do you complete this FAFSA? Well, you'll go to FAFSA.gov has been the website to go to, which it still is. So that will take you straight to the page you need to complete the FAFSA. It looks just like this, that's on this little computer here. And you will, but you can also go to studentaid.gov. The government has done a really good job of funneling all of their information to studentaid.gov. So you want to jot that one down. You can fill the FAFSA out there. You can apply for a Parent Plus loan there. If down the road, students will sign their promissory notes for federal direct loans there. Everything sort of is done, and you can learn a lot there. There's lots of information at studentaid.gov. The other thing to complete your FAFSA, this is really great. That's gone into place a couple of years ago. So I told you to sit down with your 2020 tax return, but there's actually a way on the FAFSA that you can select to use the IRS data retrieval tool. This will actually kick you over to the IRS website. You'll retrieve your IRS tax information from the 2020 return. That's the return that you'll be looking at to fill out the FAFSA for 22-23. And it will populate the FAFSA with that data. So it is easier for you. You're answering less questions on the FAFSA. You're not going line by line looking for your adjusted gross income on your tax return. And it's verified information for the schools you're applying to. So it's concrete information. So it's ease of use for you and the schools. And lastly, you want to remember, so you need to indicate on that FAFSA form which schools should receive your information. So these are the schools you're applying to. And you can only include 10 schools at a time. So every school has a FAFSA code, and they all have them posted on their websites. You can usually find them on the financial aid pages of every school's website, but you can also search by school when you're completing the FAFSA. And you can only put 10 at a time. So if you're applying to more than 10 schools, you need to submit the FAFSA to those first 10, go back, switch a couple of schools, maybe the ones you're least interested in, plug in new FAFSA codes for any other schools, and release your data again to them.
Can you just, you mentioned a couple of years there. You mentioned applying for 22, 23 and using your 2020 returns. Can you just clarify that one more time? Because you said a bunch of years there and my brain got
I know, and it's so strange. So when you're applying for financial aid for 2022-23, that would be, if you're seniors in high school right now, that would be your freshman year of college. So you're applying for aid. But that is based on the tax data from 2 years ago. So when it's 2022, it'll be 2 years ago. And that is because you're filing that this year or, soon into the following year. And it's the tax return that's completed, right? None of us have done our 2021 tax returns. We won't do that till April of next year. So we have a complete return in 2020. So that is the year on which everything is based. Now, when you have fluctuations in income from year to year to year, you can communicate that to the schools once you're more tied into them, and an acceptance comes through and you're like, you should know my income changed dramatically from 2020 to 2021, which the pandemic has impacted so many people. So that could be the case. You'll reach out to schools at that time, and there's things we can do to consider 21 income. But the base year for financial aid for your freshman year, 22-23, is 2020 taxes. Does that make sense? So when do we complete the FAFSA? Well, the FAFSA for the 2022-23 year opens on October 1st, this coming October 1st. So that's when it becomes available to the public. Now, every school will have its own deadline to complete financial aid materials, and every state too. So I didn't mention previously, but lots of states will have state aid. There's state financial aid available, and we'll learn more about that in a future session. So in Massachusetts, we have the Mass Grant, and the FAFSA deadline for Mass Grant consideration is May 1st. So that's, the next May 1st. So we don't worry too much. As incoming freshmen, you should have filed your FAFSA way before May 1st because you have applied for admission way before May 1st. So it's something to also consider in future years. But whatever state you're from, you can see that information at studentaid.gov. Actually, if you have state aid and when your deadline is, it should be listed there. It's listed as part of the FAFSA too. But every school is also has its own financial aid deadlines, and deadlines tied to early decision, early action, regular decision. So my best advice is always to go to every college or university you're interested in, find their financial aid information. And you'll notice once you start navigating websites, they're very much organized in the same way. Usually there's an admissions and aid sort of information listed together. You're drilling down to financial aid and you're finding their deadlines. And I always say, make a spreadsheet, make a list, write down every school you're interested in, write down their deadline, and then complete the FAFSA by the earliest deadline on that list. And that will ensure that you're getting your information in on time. And at the same time, you can make a list of what other documents they're requiring, or if they're requiring the CSS profile or another application for financial aid. But you can make a list of each school's requirements and then make sure you file that FAFSA by the deadline, because schools do, they have a limited amount of institutional aid that they can award to students and offer to students, and there is a true limit to it. So, you definitely want to meet those deadlines that are published.
Can I ask a kind of an obvious question and maybe a silly one, Krista? Like, is it okay to submit your FAFSA before the student has even submitted their application?
I mean, you can. It'll just live in electronic land. And once we know you're an applicant to the school, we'll retrieve that information and pull it into our system. But I don't think it's going to hurt anything. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. No, you can complete it as of October 1st. So then what happens? We've done the FAFSA, you made it through, now what? Now you wait for everything, right? So the first thing that will happen is you'll receive a student aid report. We call it a SAR. That will be emailed to you. Whatever emails that you enter when you complete your FAFSA, make a note of those. Have that be that college email that you want everything to be sent to. So that you know where to look. You want to make sure you're checking that email. So you'll receive a student aid report, and you want to review it for accuracy. I can't tell you how many times people add extra zeros to their assets, right? You don't want to do that. So check it for accuracy. You can correct the FAFSA. You can make a correction, and then every school you've submitted on there or put their code on will receive the corrected information. Automatically will receive your FAFSA. And as this admission application process goes on, we receive your FAFSA. We're checking things for completeness, and many schools will reach out to the family for additional documentation. So we'll say, oh, this family is interested in financial aid. Let me tell them what else they need to do. And every school will behave a little bit differently. Some will need nothing more. Some will need everything but your kitchen sink. So you just want to respond to the emails, give the schools what they are requesting. Usually the schools that request the most information from you give out the most amounts of money. So it's definitely worth the time, right, and the effort of doing that. And then once your sons, daughters are admitted to schools, you'll receive a financial aid offer. So that's why it's important. All of this is done ahead of time. Once an admission decision is rendered, then a financial aid offer usually comes at the same time or shortly thereafter. Okay, so lastly, we're going to get into some terminology. And this is your first brush, maybe you've heard all this before, you have older kids and I'm bored, but maybe this is your first brush with some of this information. You should understand what cost of attendance means. And that is all of the direct costs or the billed costs and all of the indirect or unbilled costs. So direct costs would be tuition, housing, meals. Those are the direct costs, the fees, anything that the college charges. Anything indirect, that could include books, because that's something student will buy once they know what classes they're taking and what's required for the class. They'll have to buy their books. They'll move into their dorm room. They'll need a comforter, things that go along with living on campus, right down to shampoo, right? There's a trip to the store that happens to just have those basics. And that's all a part of the cost of attendance of going to college. And that will vary. That's a variable, right? It's going to vary, that cost, school to school to school. Now, the FAFSA is determining what we call an expected family contribution, or an EFC. And that really is an eligibility index calculated by the FAFSA. It's determining eligibility for the federal aid. It's actually an index. And I want to say this because it's happening down the road, but in future years, in the next couple of years, the federal government's actually doing away with this EFC term and calling it what it really is. So this will happen during your time in college, but that EFC is going to turn into a student aid index, because that's really what it is. And it isn't exactly what you'll pay for higher education. It's not exactly what the parent or the student is going to pay to go to college. So that's important to know. But it is tagged as the EFC, or the expected family contribution. So colleges are going to look at the cost of attendance of their institution minus your expected family contribution, your EFC, and that equals your financial need. So you have this variable, which is the cost. Every school is going to be different. You have this constant, which is your EFC calculated by the FAFSA, and that equals financial need, which equals your aid eligibility. And again, every school is going to behave different. So they're going to meet that need, that financial need, differently. Some will meet your full need, like we do at Holy Cross, we meet families' full need, but other schools will not. And you'll experience a variety of financial aid offers based on the information you've provided them. Same information, and then you'll get varying responses based on institutional resources. But the federal aid component will be somewhat, it should be the same. Basically, except for loans. You don't need to take any loans if you don't want to. So that's pretty much a wrap of what I wanted to share with everybody.
Great. Krista, we've got lots of questions. I'm going to throw some rapid fire ones at you that should be very quick and simple, and then we'll deal with some ones that'll be a little bit more wordy. But first, do we create an FSA account in the student or the parent name?
You will create an FSA ID in both. So there'll be a student name, FSA ID, and the parent name. And you can go in as the parent and sort of establish all this. I have done that. You can go in and establish the FSA ID, but it is a username password for each individual.
And just to clarify, the FAFSA website is different from studentaid.gov, and they need to set up accounts on both sites?
Okay, yeah, I didn't want to confuse things by throwing that out. So FAFSA.gov, well, that's the site. You can go there. It's going to take you to the right page on studentaid.gov. Studentaid.gov, you can remember that forever. You can navigate to filling out a FAFSA, completing a FAFSA. It houses everything to do with federal student aid, and lots of information to read about what types of aid, what types of federal aid does the government offer, the loans, the interest rates. It's a resource for 4 years of higher ed. But no, it's basically one thing. So I'm giving you the shortcut, FAFSA.gov, or the long way in is just studentaid.gov.
Great. Kind of a obvious question. Do I need to fill out a FAFSA every year?
You do. You need to fill out a FAFSA every year. They're year specific, and they're always going to be based on tax data from 2 years prior.
And then we had some questions about the state deadlines. Is that for the state that the school is in or the state that you reside in?
It will be the state that you reside in. So Massachusetts residents, you might be eligible for a Mass grant, and that can travel with you to out-of-state schools, which we have an agreement with, which the state of Massachusetts has an agreement with. So it could be limited,
and on that point, what's considered the primary residence? The question here is if they own a home in Europe, but they live and rent in the United States, what's the primary residence?
I think that's where you spend more than 6 months of the year. Like in my definition of primary residence is where you spend more than 6 months of the year, the majority of your time. And my question would be, and if you file a U.S. tax return, which they might, you'd be using that to complete your FAFSA.
And how about with multiple children? Do you create a separate FAFSA for each child?
You do. You create a separate FAFSA for each child. So you as the parent, so say you have twins, or maybe you already have an older, or if this is your first entering, but let's just say you have twins. So you have twins, you're going to have to complete a FAFSA for your, child A, and then you complete a FAFSA for child B. Your FSA ID as the parent would stay the same. You can be you forever with your own FSA ID, even for younger children down the road, that's yours forever. Put in a safe place, but every student needs his or her own financial aid application.
Here's a little bit more of a tricky question. What happens when FAFSA and EFC aren't financially feasible?
Yeah. Well, every school is going to be so different in how they interpret your needs. So you're saying the EFC, I'm not sure if that means what that means exactly, but you're going to, the cost of higher education, it varies so much institution to institution. Every school is offering aid in different ways. Some offer, all need-based aid and they meet full need. Some offer large amounts of merit aid. So when you think we're not going to qualify for any aid, but your son or daughter qualifies for some merit money, and that happens a lot. So I really encourage trying to educate yourself on, reading the websites of these schools and trying to just determine. A lot of them, our goal is to be transparent, and I know it feels like schools are not transparent, and that's all we strive to do is be transparent. But it's so tricky because every school does it a little different, and they have different resources. Every school has a different amount of resources. So just to complete the FAFSA, no matter whether you think you're going to, qualify for aid or not, if it shows that you have very high need, chances are you'll be offered a large amount of aid that's going to make college affordable. So that's really important.
And we have just a few more minutes for questions. So if anybody has any last questions, just put them in the Q&A. What about a situation where a family where parents are divorced and share custody? Which parent fills out the FAFSA?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, because this is sort of changing. Remember how I mentioned the EFC is going to become an SAI, a student aid index? They're always changing things, but historically, it's always been the custodial parent is the parent with whom the student lives the most. Okay, and if that's 50-50, okay, then who supports the parent? Who supports the student more than 50%? So it is actually shifting now to truly become who's supporting the student more than 50%. So it's almost becoming sort of, well, I can't say it. I mean, every situation is so different. If you're having trouble, you can call the financial aid office. I'll help you talk it out and determine, or email me, or email any school you're interested in, and we're happy to help with these kinds of questions. But it's really wherever the student lives more than 50% of the time, or the parent who supports more than 50%.
Gotcha. Let's talk about 529 plans. Do they have to be declared?
Well, that's a good question, and I meant to mention that. So the investments on the FAFSA should include your 529 plans for all of your children. It includes 529 college savings plans, and it's counted as a parent asset. So it's not a student asset. It is a parent asset.
I've got maybe 2 more questions here. Are you able to qualify for federal and aid from the college and combine them if necessary?
Absolutely, yes. And the college will do that for you. That when they put together a financial aid offer, it will likely include your federal aid eligibility, any state aid eligibility that they know of if you're from their state, and any institutional aid eligibility.
And I think I've got Childline. I think I've got 2 more. What about multiple children? Do they, if you've got twins, or if you've got older children in college, will that come through in the paperwork?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things that the FAFSA will collect is the number in the household. So you're entering in where, there's 5 of us in the household and there's 2 in college, and that will increase your financial need. Okay, that will increase your financial need when there's more than 1 in college. And when that sibling graduates, the older sibling graduates, that will decrease the financial need. But even that piece of the FAFSA is changing in the future. So I don't want you to think back and think this is stupid, because these things change every year. But that is the basis of the FAFSA currently.
Okay, and I've got my own last question, Krista. What about people who just struggle understanding some of this? You did a great job of laying out the steps. But I can imagine that some people can follow the steps that you're talking about, dive into these websites, and just hit a roadblock. Especially with the FAFSA, they can't find a piece of information. They can't necessarily understand the question.
Yeah.
What do they do then? Should they reach out to the student's guidance counselor? Should they reach out to, is there a FAFSA help 1-800 number to call? Or should they contact a particular financial aid office at a college?
Yeah, I think you should start with studentaid.gov and the contact information that you find there for some help, but you definitely can call a financial aid office at any college too, and we can help you. I mean, and the high schools usually offer some sort of financial aid websites or webinars or in-person, meetings to help the parents of seniors better understand the financial aid. And I feel like you almost need to hear it all a few times too. I think just listening to this whole process and all this language that we use over and over again helps the understanding. But if you're in the process of completing the FAFSA and you're just confused, I would do the best you can too, and know that you can go back and correct it as well. So, there's a fallback there. So, get through it as best you can go back to correct it. But there should be numbers and there's communication on studentaid.gov, people to contact.
That's a great segue, just to mention that for those who had questions that we weren't able to answer in time tonight, know that you can certainly reach out to us in the admission office or in the Office of Financial Aid at Holy Cross. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. Know also that we have 3 more financial aid webinars coming up. I will invite and encourage you to check out the website. There's the link to register for upcoming sessions. We've got sessions on the CSS profile coming up. We've got a session on paying for college, talking about the opportunities. And we've got a session about financial aid fast facts, and we'll go through some terminology, and there's going to be so much great information. Remember, all of these sessions are archived on our website. Tonight should be archived at some point tomorrow or Tuesday, and the same for all of our following sessions. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was great, Krista, great information. Thanks to all of our participants and everyone behind the scenes. And thanks to everyone for coming. Stay safe, stay sane, and stay in touch. Good night.